Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Big Sky. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Literally picking up where the last episode left off, you have Cassie having just shot Rick, and you can tell she's shaking because obviously there's still a lot about her past, about her time in the academy, like why she kind of dropped out or got kicked out or whatever the circumstances were, why she wasn't able to complete it. And I'm assuming it's something, because that was a conversation. I think maybe that's supposed to be like the irony behind it was like the whole conversation her and Rick had beforehand about the whole like, oh, like you've never like pulled, like it was a whole conversation about like her pulling a gun. I don't know if I thought about it at the time. I don't think that was the same episode. I think that was a different episode. That conversation happened. Just, I think that was kind of probably the point to make it go like, oh yeah, they had this conversation about whether or not when the time came would she be able to pull the trigger, and he was kind of egging her on because he honestly didn't think she'd be able to pull the trigger. Proved you wrong. But we do kind of see that he was kind of still alive. I was like, oh, because I was surprised. I was like, wow. I was like, oh, he's dead. I was like, ugh. But then like they twisted and was like, oh no, like I guess because she was shaking a little bit. She wasn't her, like, it's just like, you could tell like she's like shaking and just not used to the situation. Like I think this might be the first time she's ever just shot anyone in general. Because I don't, like I said, I vaguely remember the conversation she had with the Rick about it, but I don't remember 100% the detail. Like I said, I don't think she shot anyone before, so I think Rick's the first. But like, hey, you saved everyone. Home dude comes down there and looks kind of a little, I guess because at first I was like, oh, like I felt like this is probably going to look a little bad for Cassie. I mean, granted, she kind of gives her statement about like he counted down, he got the 4, I pulled the trigger on him. It's like, I'm sure Jerry, Danielle, and Grace, I mean, Grace makes it damn clear later on. She's like, honestly, he may have his issues, but Ronald's not nearly as bad as and as scary as Rick was. At least there was some form of compassion. Granted, it's not like he's a good person, but there's at least some compassion when it came to Ronald. Not as much when it came to Rick. He didn't have the kid-friendly gloves on as much as like they did, that Ronald did. So, regardless, what I thought was interesting about this episode is it's mainly an aftermath episode of like the ramifications of everything that's just a fallout. They quickly find, I think they kind of skipped over how they found Cody's body. It must have been something in his notes or something. I don't know. That was interesting. When I'm like, we just skipping into them finding Cody? I mean, it must have been super nearby. Maybe they found some, I was like, I guess they found some tracks or something, or maybe they followed maybe they looked at like where he previously was on his vehicle or something like that. That, I don't know, they tracked that down super fast. And obviously you see Cassie and Jenny breaking down because they were still holding out hope that Cody was still alive. Because there was even a suggestion, I think it was between Jenny and her son, that maybe he was on a bender. They brought up like, Cody's like complicated history, that they were kind of making it seem like maybe he was on a bender, but Cassie's the one that's had the bad feeling the entire time, and it turns out to be true, because she said she had this feeling before when it came to her husband, and she kind of didn't really listen to it, so she was trying to listen to it this time. So for things to turn out like that, for both of them, this was someone that they loved and cared about. Obviously Jenny just kind of jokingly refers to it just as the guy you slept with, but it's like, no, she had feelings for Cody, and it's like, did Cody feel the same way? It seems like it, but it's like that will be something they'll never be able to get clarity or it. I mean, the closest thing they can get to closure is solving this, because obviously Ronald's still out there. And the whole situation with his mom continues to be interesting, because now his mom's like, what are you going to do? Like, it's like, once again, I'm just waiting for it. It's like his mom has to be dead. He had to have snapped and killed his mom at some point in time, and that's all in his head. Just her reactions to a lot of stuff. The fact is that she's like, well, it's like, but I mean, it could just be, because it feels like they're going down kind of like the Norman Bates, like, angle. It seems like that's where they're going a little, down a psycho route. That I'm curious about that. It seems like it could be a situation of, he snapped and did that because he got tired of his mom. Because even at one point during the episode, while he's talking to his mom, we see at one point it seemed like it was a flash of him attacking his mom and kind of strangling her. And I'm like, I don't think that was from an earlier episode. I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure they're including that to be like, yeah, like I think the breadcrumbs are there. It's just going to be, they'll probably wait for the right moment to spring it on you. Like, yeah, he's been crazy this entire time, which probably, in fact, might make him that much more dangerous than Rick. I mean, Rick has got his own issues, which, once again, Rick's still alive. They're rushing him to the ICU. Mary Lee is there. That was an awkward thing when like her and Cassie ran into each other. I was like, ugh. But Cassie has to be one informer, like saying like they identified your husband as their captor, so it's kind of like ugh. And now it's that situation for her. It's like me and my husband spent so long not seeing each other, not really noticing each other. So it's like, she's like, this is kind of on me because the monster my husband kind of is. It's been there the entire time, but we kind of walk past each other like strangers, and we because it seems like she kind of tried to at least make more of an effort than he did, but it's like, well, now in retrospect, it's like, that's probably why he kind of kept you at a little bit of a distance. But now she sees like her husband, like anything that happened is like, that's on me, especially because news comes out about Cody, so I'm sure that probably makes her feel a little worse, like knowing that, like, well, I don't think the news had been released at the time that Cody was killed by Rick. It's not till Jenny brings it up, which is like, yeah, she's there she's in this complicated situation of like, yeah, this is still your husband, but also he's done all these terrible things. So it's like, it's that thing of like, what do you do in that situation? Is it right for you to be like, telling the nurse to play some Frank Sinatra for him so that he can, potentially help with, his situation? But it's like, should you, and you're there by his bedside, it's like, I'm not trying to blame her or anything. It's a complicated situation because like, this is a man you've been married to. You still love him. You have a complicated relationship. I mean, even before all this, but now this on top of it, it's just like, ugh. Then you also have Ronald calling, which Ronald's just trying to find out what Rick's situation is like. And it's like, shit, Rick's still alive. And Rick made it clear that if he goes down, I'm going down with him because he has records and proof of, everything. Which Ronald later on shows up in, I don't know why he didn't try. I guess part of me was wondering why didn't he try to call Mary Lee to like get her to leave the house and then try to break in afterwards. But he did it. I guess he didn't realize she was home. So I almost when he showed up like that, but he was wearing a baseball cap and everything, or at least a hat and everything. So I was like, maybe so he's trying to duck and hide his identity. Because I was wondering why didn't he just like, was he planning to get there just to be like, hey, Mary Lee, and try like swoon her and trying to get her to let him in. That's what I was wondering about. I was like, is that really going to work? Especially considering the circumstances. Like, is that really going to work? But it's like, no, he was just skulking around, and I guess he's like, shit, she's home. I'm a bounce. Because he needs to get to that secret room, apparently, that Rick has that will most likely have all... Because he's like, as long... Like, yeah, Danny, Jerry, and Grace were able to identify him, but it's like, as long as I can prevent the cops from getting my name, because they'll bring me in if they get my name and just sit me down in front of all three of them, and they'll be like, oh, yep, that's the dude who kidnapped us. So, I mean, he's also made sure to repaint his truck and everything, too, because it's like, Jenny does have pictures of all the trucks in that area at that time, so as long as it looks a little different, they won't 100%. But Jenny does point out later on to Cassie that there is a discrepancy. It's like, on the outside or whatever, it's like 40, it's like 53 or something like that. But on the inside, it's only 47. So there's a compartment for the people kidnaps. So that, so that in itself is something he won't be able to necessarily hide, even if he paints it over. It's like, if they can find a discrepancy from the outside to the inside of the truck, then they'll know they potentially have their guy even before like learning his name and stuff like that. It'll probably be an important, like they make such a point of it. I'm like, that's probably going to potentially be an important fact later on when it comes to the case. But obviously, this is hitting everyone rough. I feel like because Cassie's got a lot on her plate. Not only is it the not only is it everything with Cody, it's also like the shooting because she's talking to Home Dude about it. And he's like, okay, so run through it again. He's like, it's okay if you don't remember if he raised his gun. She's like, no, he didn't, but he counted to 4. I know he had to go. He threatened me. I told him to drop the gun. It's like, but now it's like, did he even raise it towards you? It's like, I wasn't going to give him a chance. So now it looks a little like, you might have pulled the trigger. That's the effed up thing, but I guess it's also because, I mean, I am only specifically talking about this circumstance. I don't want my words to be taken in other circumstances within the confines of this show, in this specific episode, in this specific story of like, it is the thing of, she even said it herself. It was either him or me, but it looks away because she's had run-ins with him beforehand. So someone could make the argument later on. It's like, well, you wanted to pull the trigger on him, especially the one, the cop who had showed up, that was giving, I think it was actually, Rick's boss who was giving, Cassie and Jenny like a little shit, being like, back down last time. So she in particular might point this towards like, because especially considering she's not actually a cop and everything, so it's going to look a certain way, so we'll see. I think that's definitely, that angle to the story isn't done. I think Cassie's still going to have to be dealing with the ramifications of that later on down the road. But obviously Jenny is dealing with this. Obviously she has not only herself to look after, but her son as well, during the aftermath of this, but also when it's all said and done too, like, she's trying to work, but Denise is like, don't run from your feelings. Like, and it's because, and it seems like Denise and Cody had an even deeper relationship because it's like, you looked after him, you took care of him. She's like, we took care of each other. So that's why I was almost like wondering like what kind of relationship, like, was it almost like a motherly type of relationship, or was it kind of more like it was like, probably in general, it was probably like a familiar relationship, but I'm wondering like how deep did it go back? Like, have they known each other for years and that's why, or was it just at work? Like, I'm curious how that whole how their relationship, because amongst all three of them, it seems like she's trying to hold it together the most too, because obviously for Jenny, it's like, I gotta be strong for Justin, but I think Denise is trying to be strong for everybody as well in her own right. There was even Jenny confronting Mary Lee, and that was it's a situation where you do kind of feel bad for Mary Lee, because she's like, now it's not a good time. She's like, well, remember, let me tell you this: your husband, my husband Cody Hoyt, obviously dead, right? Well, it turns out the last person my husband was with was your husband, and it turns out, hey, he has a bullet in his head that most likely will match Rick's gun, and it's just like, she's like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, she feels like saying sorry isn't enough, because it's like, I didn't apparently know my husband that well, because it's that thing that I brought up during the undoing as well, about the whole thing of, it is the whole thing of like, well, how do you not know? This is who you're married to. How do you not know this about? So it brings you into it as well, where it's like, people might look at you a certain way and be like, oh, how did you not know? How could you not know that your husband was a monster? Like, so it turns into that type of situation. But for her, she's just like, I'm sorry for your loss. But Jenny kind of realizes like, it's not your fault this whole thing played out, because right now Mary Lee's blaming herself for not seeing the signs, but Jenny kind of realizes like, you're just kind of as lost in a situation as I am. So she's not, it's like she's dealing with everything. It's like Rick's not there, at least he's not awake to, it's like, I can yell at you and get mad at you, but it's like, you're not the one who pulled the trigger. This wasn't on you. This was Rick's whole thing. So I think, Jenny ended up kind of pulling back a little bit. But they had a little funeral for Cody, spread his ashes, singing his favorite song. I thought it was, this beautiful moment between Jenny and Cassie too, where Cassie was like, so that what do you, it's like, I don't know how to be with you. And it's like, well, why don't you try, Googling, what do you do when you slept with the husband of a widow? And she's like, ouch. It's like, I'm just kidding. She's like, I don't think there's a script for either one of us on how to do this. And it's like, you've kind of sadly been through this before, so maybe you can help me through this. So what's your advice? It's like, and for Cassie, it's like, don't push people away, like she did when her husband died. It's like, when people want to be there for you, let them be there for you. And immediately Cassie's there for her when she's on stage trying to sing, his Cody's favorite song, and then bringing Jerry on stage too. I was like, it was a beautiful moment, especially in particular for Cassie and Jenny in that regard. Them being there for each other, even at the end, Cassie offering Jenny Cody's position, because it's like, well, you have police connections, I have a detective agency, like, this job as well as Cody does, so why don't we work this together? And Jenny's saying that we're only in this for this one case, and then she's like, sure, well, we'll see at the end of the day how that whole situation plays out. But obviously you have Jenny earlier in the episode going to Jerry about wanting to, whatever information you can give me, I know, but it's like, for Jerry, it's like, whatever you need, I'll do it, because your husband died trying to find us. And it's like, if your husband, because honestly, Cody getting so close is what changed everything. She's like, I probably wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for Cody, because he interfered, because he got in the middle of this and they had to dispose of him. They kind of had to handle this case a lot more differently. It put them under pressure, and it led to a lot of mistakes, and that led to this situation. So it's like, because of Cody, I'm here right now. So for that, Jerry's like, I'll do whatever you need me to help you track, this dude down. And obviously she's, everyone's dealing with it in their own right. It's not just Cassie and Jenny that are kind of suffering. Obviously, like, after going through something traumatic like that, especially because Jerry kind of has to, she has others, but she's still kind of doing this alone, because obviously she doesn't have family to rely on like Grace and Danielle does. She's kind of on her own with this. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays, especially because that dude Jimmy was following her. I was like, oh God, don't tell me it's Ronald coming to kill her, because we saw him earlier episode taking pictures of her. I'm like, what is he doing? Like, I guess I'm curious, like, why he did that, because I was like, I guess his plan is to try. Because I think Jerry's going to be a lot easier, once again, because she has no family, a lot easier to get to than either one of, like, either Danielle or Grace. So, like, they're going to definitely be surrounded by a lot of family. So getting to them is not going to be the easiest thing, but getting to Jerry might, because she's on her own. So maybe that's what that's kind of insinuating, especially because later on he shows up. Well, she sees the letter, and it says, like, you don't learn, and she remembers, like, obviously that being Ronald, so it's like, he knows where I live, shit, because obviously she knows he's still out there. They gave the sketch and everything, but, Ronald's able to stay low-key enough that hasn't, like, popped yet, that, like, the person they're looking for is Ronald. I'm also curious about that whole Jimmy thing, where she was like, oh, can we talk, and she's like, almost like whatever their situation was, things aren't the same. I'm like, what's that all about? And it's just like, thanks for looking out for me. I was like, but I kept getting nervous. I was like, oh, please don't pop out of somewhere and just kill her, Ronald. Please don't. Oh, but still, it looks like it could lean up to that. I was like, please don't kill Jerry after everything that she went through. Like, come on, that'd suck. But it's not just Jerry that's trying to help out. Grace is too. She's like, I know I can sit down with the sketch artist again. She's like, I know I can come up with do a better job, because I know, like, his face is burned in my head. So, like, I can do a better job. She wants to do whatever she can to catch Ronald, because she's like, I don't want to die, and I would be dead, and I don't plan on dying. So I want to make sure Ronald gets captured as soon as possible. So a lot of moving pieces. In this regard, I'm really curious to see where this all goes, because I brought this up last episode. This is just based on me looking up IMDb. I kind of wish I didn't notice ahead of time, because I think it's going to be in the back of my mind the entire time. There's supposed to be 16 episodes for this season, which blows my mind, because I was like, when they dealt with this last episode, I was like, wait, we killed Rick. Only thing out there is Ronald. I'm like, how are we going to? Because that to me shows you there's that much story left. But now we also realize, like, oh, Rick is awake now. Even Marilee was like, yeah, the doctors are saying, like, he wouldn't be who he was. So it's like, probably might be suffering some memory loss, maybe even a personality change. I almost kept halfway expecting Ronald to show up to kill him in the hospital. Doesn't mean that still won't happen. And even if it's not in the hospital, he might still do it at some point in time. But at the very least, he might try and feign ignorance of either like, hey, I legitimately don't remember what I did, or I'm pretending like I don't know what I did. Doesn't change the fact is that Mary Lee's going to be like, yeah, that whole relationship's, that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But also, you know, what Ronald's actions are for here. Like, is the rest of this season really just going to be going after Ronald, or are there going to be other parts to play in the story? That's what I'm curious. Like I said, this is only episode 16. We still got like 10 left, and I'm like, where do you take that, you know? But we'll ultimately have to wait and see where all this takes us going forward into the next episode. Like I said, this was just kind of more of like the mourning period aftermath of this section of things. And it's like, got to jump right back in the investigation because we still got Ronald out there. So I'm sure he's going to try and manipulate this Mary Lee situation to his advantage, whether it's to get to Ronald, whether it's to get to Rick, or whether it's to get to his secret room, or maybe both. We'll ultimately have to wait and see. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.